Chapter 17. It came as a surprise, or rather shock, when Theo received the invitation from Mr. Richardson to lead his school assembly with a lecture on Nigeria. Theo had given many talks about Nigeria while at Oxford, often to schools and times to churches, but this request was the most important thus far. Not only because of the reputation of Bellamy Boys' School, but principally because the invitation came from Vanessa's father, and it couldn't have come at a better time, since he had just heard that he had received a first-class degree and won a graduate scholarship. There was a time when Theo told himself that he didn't care what Vanessa's father thought of him, but that had never really been true. It was certainly not true now that his relationship with Vanessa had grown more serious, which was why Theo took a lot of time and care in his preparations for the talk. He made sure he had all the necessary facts and practiced his delivery out loud so that on the day it would go well. "What do you clever boys know about Nigeria?" he began. A flurry of little hands went up. "Nigeria is near the desert. The people don't wear clothes. Boys play with animals. It's boiling hot." Theo thanked each boy for his contribution, thinking how wonderful it was that children spoke openly, making his task of correcting the stereotypical views easy. Instead of presenting a simplified version of what he usually said to adults, an overview of Nigeria's history, its topography, its main industries, and political parties, Theo began with his childhood, telling them what it was like growing up in Nigeria. His stories held the boys' attention, and his talk was a big hit. "Bravo," Mr. Richardson said at the end, patting Theo on the back as he led him to his study. It was a room that reminded Theo of Mr. Fairclough's study. It had that same stuffy smell of old books and papers, and the same neat row of trophies and shields displayed in glass cabinets. Even some of the decorations, the Nigerian gourds and masks, were similar to those that hung in his old headmaster's office in Iboden. "Do sit down." Mr. Richardson gestured to him to take a seat in front of the desk. Theo sat and watched as Mr. Richardson lit his pipe. He felt pleased with how things had gone and expected a discussion on its value for the boys. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" said Mr. Richardson, catching Theo completely off guard. "My daughter seems very enamored with you," Mr. Richardson added, not waiting for Theo's reply. "And you of her, I imagine." "Well, yes, sir." Theo fought to find the appropriate words but found himself simply staring at Mr. Richardson. "You see, Theo," the older man continued, taking his pipe from his mouth, "in many ways you and I are quite similar, aren't we? I was fond of a woman from a different class in the way that you seem fond of a woman of a different race. My wife, as you know, is from the upper classes, and her family didn't approve of me. You understand, don't you?" Theo nodded, deciding it was easy to let Mr. Richardson talk, for it was obvious that he had things he wanted to say and probably didn't want to hear a response anyway. "Well, Mrs. Richardson and I married, but our families have never entirely accepted our marriage. Now with you and Vanessa, if you ever were to think of marriage, you would face an even greater challenge. One that is, I fear, insurmountable. I hope you understand it is my duty to warn you of this and that I have a responsibility for my daughter's happiness. You must certainly be aware of the difficulties of a cross-racial union." Theo nodded again, stunned by what he was hearing. So Mr. Richardson thought that he wanted to marry his daughter? And now he was talking about the challenges that mixed-race couples faced. with half-caste children. How sumptuous of the man. And Vanessa is impetuous, you see, Mr. Richardson continued, and has a tendency to dash into things. Not long ago she got all hot and bothered about Lumumba wanting to go to the Congo. Really, she's most naive. Always jumping into things, like her mother at that age. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, Theo nodded. What you are saying is that I must not think of marrying your daughter. What I am saying, young man, is that the challenges would be great and, as someone who is older and wiser, I must advise you against the idea. And that was how it ended, except of course that was not how it really ended. Theo still had the journey back to Oxford and an ensuing conversation with Vanessa, who was eager to hear how things had gone. How was it? She asked, slipping an arm around his waist as they walked back to college from where they had met in town. You're quiet. What's the matter? Nothing, he said, still not knowing where to start or what to tell her. Oh, come on, something's wrong. I can tell. She stopped and turned to face him just as a policeman cycled past. All right, miss? He asked, propping one foot on the ground. Yes. Vanessa snapped. The policeman hesitated, looked Theo up and down, and then pedaled away. What's the matter? Tell me. No, not before you tell me. Well, what is it? She insisted, reaching for his hand and pulling him towards her. Just. He stopped as she touched the side of his face. Tell me, she urged. Today your father. My father what? Could we talk about this later, Vanessa? My father said what? Okay. Your father told me that he didn't approve of us. What do you mean? He's always said good things. He hasn't, Theo said crossly without meaning to, but he was tired of her being so naive. Did she really think her father liked him? And now she was looking innocently at him, gazing into his eyes and threading her arms around his waist. He held HCR briefly and then moved from her grasp. Vanessa, we can't be together when your father is so opposed. What do you mean? Tell me what he said, exactly. She held out her hand. And he took it reluctantly. He said it would be difficult for us, that the cultures would be too different. And that one day if we were to, well, it would be difficult if we had children. Well, who cares what he says? She replied. All that matters is that we love each other. But relationships are also about family, Vanessa. And I would sacrifice my family for you, Theo. Vanessa, he took her hands, touched by her love which he knew was genuine. You know I wouldn't let you do that. We must respect your father. You are young and Nigeria is not a calm place these days. Perhaps it's God's will. Oh bloody hell, don't bring God into this, she said, letting go of his hand. So now you think I'm too young? You think I don't know what I want? Not too young, Vanessa, but just too independent sometimes. Look, Vanessa. It's late, I can't think straight, and too independent? It's you, Theo, who needs to learn some independence. You won't confront these things, will you? You register something, block it out of your mind, and never deal with it. My father is a racist. It's simple. Don't you see that? But Vanessa, you just told me that your father didn't mean it. Well, of course I'd say that. It's much easier to pretend, isn't it? But I'm tired of that and wish you'd stand up to it. Don't just turn the other cheek with my father, or the policeman, or You wanted me to confront the policeman just now, and your father? And tell them what? That they're racist? You confront them, Vanessa, if it's so easy. And it's so easy for you, isn't it, Teo? You never wanted to marry an English girl anyway. That's still what it is, isn't it? Why don't you just go and find a nice subservient Nigerian girl who will do exactly what you say and agree with everything you want? Well, nobody is talking about marriage anyway, Teo said roughly, and then immediately regretted it. Mom? The policeman had returned and was jumping off his bicycle with baton in hand. Do we have some trouble here? Hands off her. I'm perfectly fine, just bugger off, will you? Vanessa replied. I beg your pardon? She's okay. We are together, Teo replied. I wasn't asking you, the policeman warned. I'm okay, for God's sake. Leave us alone. She shouted. Her shoulders were shaking, and Teo took off his coat to wrap it around her. The police man watched, but Teo didn't care. He took her in his arms to comfort her, to comfort himself. It had started raining as Teo walked back to college, and only then did he realize that he had left his coat at Vanessa's. Usually he would have sprinted to outrun the shower, but the damp and drizzle had already seeped through his clothes the way English rain always did. No point in running, Teo mumbled to himself. Maybe Vanessa was right. He should have stood up to her father and argued with him instead of giving in. Teo flicked the rain from his face and picked up his pace. If Vanessa really thought he couldn't stand up for himself, he would soon prove her wrong. I love her, Teo spoke to the rain. Damn the rain, damn her father, and damn every racist in England. For once in his life he was going to act on impulse, and prove to Vanessa that he was capable of being a man of action. No one, not society, not her father, was going to stop him from proposing now. He ran the rest of the way back to college and stood panting for a few moments as he fumbled in his trouser pockets for his keys. He opened the little door that led into the porter's lodge and ducked, but still hit his head against the top of the door frame and swore silently. Ah, Mr. Ajayi, the porter called out. Glad to see you. I've just popped a telegram under your door. Stayed here to make sure you got it. Thank you. Teo nodded, walking faster to reach his rooms. Porters rarely worked late at night, especially not during the summer when college was less busy, so Teo was worried. He jogged the last few yards and found the slip of paper sticking out from under his door. Baba is in hospital, recovering. Return home immediately. Mama.